69-3. I don't know how many people expected that type of performance Saturday afternoon inside Autzen Stadium. Welcome to the Autzen Audibles podcast. I'm Matt Prehm, Erik Skopil on the show. Post-game edition Saturday night. We've returned from Autzen Stadium. And Erik, we were expecting a Oregon victory. Both of us picked Oregon. We both picked a wide margin, and I think it's fair to say you picked a blowout, even though you didn't pick Oregon covering the spread. But in large part, it was a 28.5-point spread. That's a huge number. And it gets to the point where you wonder, that's a lot of points. Are they really going to win by that many? And quite honestly, they almost hit my total for points in the first half. They had over 340 yards in the first half. They had no turnovers in the first half, which was super impressive to see how well the defense played to allow the offense to have that many possessions and score without creating turnovers. Usually that's how you see big numbers like that. And we walk out of Autzen, Erik, with a couple questions of, one, just truly how good is Oregon? B, is Dante Moore, in my opinion, is his Heisman odds going to drastically improve? And maybe the biggest one for me is this Oregon team is light years ahead of where I think I was expecting them to be from a cohesion standpoint, from a playbook understanding standpoint, of depth standpoint. They made a Oklahoma State football program that historically over the last 20 years has been a proud program that consistently wins 9 to 11 games a year. They made them look like an FCS opponent, and truly mind-numbing numbers today from what we saw at Autzen Stadium.
Yeah, I mean, let's tackle the last part first there of just I'm completely with you. I think every Oregon fan is and you said this last show, I thought it was a good point after the Montana State win. The Montana State game was kind of what you would have expected from last year's team. With the veteran quarterback, you had some kind of pillars to build up. This year's the team, remember, they just beat a Power 4 team by 66 points, and only 4 of these guys were starters on last year's team. They are light years ahead of where I thought they would be. And to your first point, I think the answer is I don't know if there's been a more impressive team in college football through 2 weeks. I know it's really hard to measure that because the caliber of opponent is not great at this point. Montana State, Oklahoma State, certainly not on par with Ohio State beating Texas or some of these other marquee opponents and wins that we've seen. But I think it's really hard if you're an AP poll voter or whatnot to not go, should that team have some first place votes? I know they had one last week, but gosh, the way that they've played now, 2 consecutive games, pretty much flawless football. I mean, I really thinking through the game, there's very little aside from some procedural penalties and, they failed on a 4th down. I guess they did have to punt, which is a prop we talked about on our preview show. But gosh dang it, this is a really dang impressive performance once again. And just to put into perspective, I pulled up the largest margin of victories for Oregon in program history. This is the 9th largest margin, and the top 3 all happened before World War I. So, you go through this. I'll just read them off here. Largest margin of victories Oregon's had before today: 115 points against Puget Sound back in 1910.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Probably hard to pass that one. 97 points against Willamette in 1916. 95 points against Portland in 1898. We're talking about multiple centuries ago now.
These are teams that are Puget Sound. I don't know if they have a football team anymore. Willamette's a D3 school that does not give out scholarships, and Portland does not have a football team anymore.
Yeah, that sort of puts it in perspective. I'm also looking in here and see my alma mater Gonzaga on this list. I know they haven't had a school in decades. Keep going down here. 4th, 74 against Portland State. That was in 2023. That's the most recent game on this list. New Mexico in 2010 was 72 points. Nevada in 2019 was 71 points. Pacific in 1902 was 70. And then most recently, 69 points. I shouldn't say most recently, but the other ahead of them, Portland State 69 points in 2010. So this was, and you think about those schools, Matt, and you just said it, like half these teams or programs aren't even, still in operation or are D2 programs. I think aside from New Mexico and Nevada, the rest of them are like FCS right now. Like Nevada and New Mexico are both FCS programs, not exactly Power 4 programs. And that's the other point. Like this is the most impressive and most dominant Power 4 win, surpassing a 56-point win over Colorado in 2012. So you can literally sit here and say this is unprecedented from an Oregon perspective. This is the most impressive win that Oregon has had in terms of a margin. And to be honest with you, the scoring stopped at the very end of the third quarter.
Yeah.
And obviously, you're not going to say they could have scored more because, well, they could have, but you're not going to say that like
they could have scored 100 if they wanted to.
Right. You're not going to say they should have scored more, but yeah, exactly. Yeah, right. If they wanted to, and then if they would have kept the dogs on here, which, gosh, we wondered if they'd run up the score on Gundy after what he said. I think we got our answer. And like, honestly, like it happened organically. They were up 41-3 at half. The first team offense comes out, takes it right down the field. Of course, you're going to give Luke Moga some drives here as the backup quarterback. And we should note Austin Novosad dealing with an injury. That's why I think Luke Moga was out there. Of course, you're going to give him that. And then at the end of the third quarter there, Matt, when was the last time? I can't think of a sequence like that where you have consecutive pick sixes, basically back-to-back plays. There's like one play separating them to just blow the doors open. And suddenly, the crowd, it was so unique where I think a lot of people were just waiting around for a shout. And so there's a lot of people in the stadium still. And the roars of the crowd sounded like something that happened, hours before in the first quarter, not something that happened when the game was already 55-3. So, super, super impressive. We can go a bunch of different directions, but just wanted to run through some of that historical stuff to give people a sense of like what you just witnessed is not something that happens very often. And looking at the schedule the rest of the way, I'm not sure they'll put it on somebody quite like that, but gosh, that's not maybe going to be totally unprecedented, this level of dominance, maybe not the margin in future games either.
631 total yards of offense for Oregon, 319 through the air, 312 on the ground, 24 first downs. They converted 7 of 12 third downs, 1 of 2 fourth downs. This is a number that I don't know how to explain. 10.2 yards per play. They literally averaged a first down every play they ran. 17.7 yards per completion. 8.4 yards per rush. They scored touchdowns on all 4 drives inside the red zone. They, ironically enough, you look at a game and go, wow, they scored 69 points. They probably just dominated time of possession. They lost time of possession.
Yes, I know.
The 31. They had 2 pick sixes, like you mentioned. Dante Moore, 16 of 21 for 266, 3 touchdowns. He continues to look really good. And I'm going to throw out something I mentioned in my instant reactions. It's going to be, I think, a good controversial take. It'll open some discussion. It will be a little hot take-ish, but I kind of think Dante Moore's, like, for a young quarterback, I'm going to eliminate Bo Nix from this discussion because he showed up as a 4-year senior at Oregon in 2022, and in 2023, he was a returning starter for Oregon. So I'm going to kind of eliminate him kind of from the discussion here. But Dante Moore kind of reminds me from just a cool, calm, collected, highly productive, not rattled, impressive player. Maybe the most impressive, like a first-year starter at Oregon since Marcus Mariota did it in 2014 as a redshirt freshman, or in 2011 as a redshirt freshman. Like, I know he started like a handful of games at UCLA and he played the year before, but this guy does not look like. Think about what the narrative was around him when he transferred. And he initially left UCLA, hit the portal, committed to Oregon. It was a little rough for him at UCLA. His progressions weren't there. He's certainly got all the physical tools, but he's just not there yet. He looks night and day. He looks like a guy that when we were doing our bold predictions for the season, and I said should be in the Heisman discussion. You're right. Like, Oregon's as impressive as a team there is in the country through 2 weeks. And maybe Dante Moore, among new starters at big programs, is as impressive as any of these new guys are. Really, really good command of the offense. And everything about this team, I am just blown away about how advanced, how far along this team is with so many young guys. And we talked about it at length about linebacker and the decision not to hit the portal, the defensive line not to hit the portal. They did go and hit the portal at receiver, but maybe not nearly as much as we anticipated. They found one running back in the portal, but they didn't hit that position very hard. They didn't find a quarterback at the portal.
Didn't need one.
They didn't need one. They didn't go to the portal for any linebackers, and the staff was very adamant, like, hey, we are confident in the development that we have within this program. And we're seeing that come to fruition. And look, Oklahoma State, they were at a disadvantage. There's a huge talent gap, as Mike Gundy just famously pointed out from a money standpoint Monday. They were playing without their backup quarterback or without their starting quarterback. Lanning highlighted they were out maybe a couple of offensive linemen that they were maybe anticipated playing. So that all kind of factors in here. But this is still supposed to be a Power 4 team. This is still supposed to be a squad that consistently makes bowl games. This is supposed to be a really respectable program, and they made them look like an FCS opponent that's not Montana. Montana State put up a harder fight than Oklahoma State did, in my opinion. And Oregon, that's a lot in large part because of Oregon. And it's one thing to do what the Ducks did 59-13 against Montana State week 1. It's another thing to score more points, have more yards, be more explosive, be more dominant defensively against a Power 4 school like Oklahoma State. You cannot walk away from Oregon and say, yeah, but look how poor Oklahoma State is. This Oregon team, wait till they see someone good. They played through that. This team was very, very impressive.
Right. I mean, like I'll be really curious to see what the poll does, and I don't know. Really, that doesn't matter at all. Like, honestly, the polls at this point are just for fans to look at and try to get an assessment, right? And like, but just from a perception perspective, Oregon's played Montana State and Oklahoma State. There shouldn't be much of a case for them to move up, just based upon the caliber of opponent. But when you boat race those teams and beat those teams by like a combined 100 points, I mean, how do you not equate that to this team is absolutely for real? Like, they throw out who they're playing, just the way they're performing. You mentioned it, 10.2 yards per play. I know James Crepia did some research, and back to 1994, he couldn't find a game where they had a better yards per play average, which doesn't surprise me. Like you said, literally averaged a first down every time. And I mean, you want to run through it here. One of the things that stood out to me was just the fact that they opened up the passing game. They had 6 passes of 25 yards or more. They had 3 of 42 yards or more. They had 9 rushes of 10 yards or more, including 2 more for 50 yards. Like, so you look at this game, they had 5 plays of 50 yards or more. I mean, that's 250 yards or more basically on those plays. And that's just a handful of offensive sequences. And, I'd have to go back to the entire game log, but I think in the first half, like basically every scoring drive had like a 40-plus yard play in it, or at least a couple 25-yard runs. I mean, it's just the explosiveness was really impressive. And to return to Dante really quickly, you brought up the Marcus comparison. I was just pulling this up here. You go back, and I know last week we mentioned he and Marcus had pretty much identical debuts, statistically, like really close. It was 18 for 23 for Dante, 18 for 22 for Marcus. Both threw for over 200 yards and 3 touchdowns. Dante's second game was better than what Marcus did. Marcus against Fresno State, 19 for 27 and a touchdown, 166 yards. Dante did a 16 for 21, 266 and 3 scores. But just to stick, so that's an apt point, and no one here should say he's going to absolutely win the Heisman Trophy.
That's unfair. Right.
That's unfair. And frankly, remember, Marcus Mariota didn't win the Heisman Trophy in 2012. He won it 2 years later. Right. In 2014. But the point remains, like at least that comparison and that conversation, we can have it right now. But the other thing that really stood out was in that first game, and I thought John Evans, our student reporter, did a really good job kind of writing about this today. We touched on it a little bit in the previous show. Was in the opener, super impressive, but only I think the longest pass downfield was like 18 yards, and no passes of 20 yards downfield. They opened it up today.
Yeah.
The throw to Corin was a thing of beauty. I think the throw to Malik Benson was like one of the best.
Unbelievable dime.
One of the best throws I can remember from an Oregon quarterback. And I know that's probably kind of prisoner of the moment. And, I think back, I know Bo had some great deep balls, and even Dylan had some gorgeous deep balls last year that kind of gets overlooked a little bit because you think of him, you think of him as being dink and dunk, but he could unleash it too. Like Dante has now shown in 2 weeks kind of the whole bag, and it's really hard not to kind of get ahead of yourself and think, what is this going to look like now in 2 weeks? I mean, I hate to put it that way. And I think if you're an Oregon fan, frankly, you're probably feeling this way of, Northwestern and Oregon State probably aren't going to be very competitive. Oregon State's 0-2. I don't know. Matt, do you know what Northwestern did today? I know they lost to Tulane pretty bad in the opening game. I'm going to pull it up.
Yeah, let me look it up real quick while you.
Yeah.
I can't imagine they looked good.
And I don't.
Against Tulane.
Right, and that's my point. Lost 23-3 to Tulane. Maybe they had a cakewalk opponent and they got a bounce back. But my point is, I don't think there's really any drama these next 2 weeks. I think we know what to expect. This team should roll through these next two games, and Penn State's creeping up here. And I'm going, they didn't look. I know it was the final score was like 34-0. It's a shutout. That's never. But their offense didn't really blow away FIU today either. So I'm not saying I'm going to predict they'll win that game necessarily, but gosh, does it feel like that's absolutely in the cards with the way this team is playing. And it'll be really interesting to see, like, what does this look like for 4 quarters with your top guys on the field? And I know just looking at giving kind of a cursory glance over at the Penn State message board on 24/7, we were looking at that kind of at the half, and they were getting a little bit nervous over there. And I don't blame them. Like, if you're sitting there and you're watching a game that's going to be your marquee game, at least this month for them and for Oregon the whole season, you got to be going like, this might be a lot stiffer challenge than we'd expected, because we're not the only ones that kind of thought Oregon might be a little slow out of the gate. They are light years ahead of where I thought that might be.
To answer your question, Northwestern played Friday. They played the Leathernecks. Do you know who the Leathernecks are?
No, I can't say I do.
Western Illinois. They're not good at football. Northwestern won 42-7. So a good solid bounce back from the loss to Tulane week 1. But Western Illinois now 0-2 on the season. They're historically not good. So I would not read too much into this. But to your point, even about Penn State, again, this is a team that's looking, their fan base looking out ahead, as every team does, and they're seeing an Oregon team coming into town, like you said, margin of victory over 100 points through 2 games, and they kind of had a really slow start to beat Nevada 46-11 week 1, and then another slow start to beat FIU today 34-0. Another game where they're slowing, their starts are slow. I think what's become evident with Oregon, and some of this has become the opponent they're playing. We'll see. We'll truly get a sense maybe next week on the road what life is like away from Autzen, where it's not a friendly confines. And then in 3 weeks when they play Penn State, but when they play much higher level of talent. But this Oregon team has shown you've got to be able to match Oregon drives for drive, points for points, because punting in your own in your opponent's territory, or taking field goals like Oklahoma State did when they got into the red zone and then couldn't score a touchdown when they got inside, I think, the 15 and had to settle for 3. That doesn't help you. You have to score. You have to score touchdowns, because Oregon's offense, they have shown their explosive abilities is going to be tough to stop. I mean, think about the big plays they had today. They had 15 what's qualified as air quote big plays in the official box score by Oregon. Running plays of 10 or more qualified. They had 9 of those. They had runs of 59 yards, 53 yards, 22 yards, 25 yards. 3 of them went for touchdowns. And then they had 6 pass plays, which went for 15 or more yards, 65 yards. The third play of the scrimmage for Oregon, 65-yard touchdown pass to Corian Moore, a 42-yard pass, which you referenced, to Malik Benson, a 51-yard pass from Luke Moga to Jeremiah McClellan, who was one more broken tackle away from scoring. Got down to the Oklahoma State 2-yard line, was really, really close to scoring as well. This offense is super explosive, and I think maybe the 2-week takeaway for me offensively is A, how good Dante Moore looks, and B, just it feels like there's very little drop off when the backup running back comes in, or the third string running back comes in,
or the fifth string. Or the fifth string. Mekhi Hughes was great today. Yeah. I mean, not great, but he showed some things today.
Or when the third unit at receiver tight end comes in, and it's Roger Salapaga at tight end and Cooper Perry and Kyler Casper at receiver. Like, the drop off from that group compared to the starting group, it feels non-existent. And the play designs, we were really impressed today. They showed a lot of play designs. I think you had a great comment. Like, that tells us they're not really worried about their couple opponents coming up, where they're okay putting this stuff on tape, maybe setting some things up for down the road, maybe at Penn State. But the play designs, the creativity, and then the execution and the talent that sets in when they're on the field, whether you're a starter or not, that's like my big takeaway for this offense is it feels like it's coming from everywhere. You don't know who to cover. You don't know where to kind of have your strong alignments at, because quite honestly, it's coming from every place, and every position scores, and every position has multiple guys where you're like, he looks like an NFL player.
Yeah, and to kind of solidify that point, 5 different pass catchers had receptions of 26 yards or more. It's not like one guy was the one doing it. And 5 different running backs had runs of 19 or more. 5 different players, Luke Moga included, with a 22-yard run. And we knew about his speed there, and he certainly showed it. I think Oklahoma State defenders were like, oh, he can really get out there once he got to the edge. So it was a lot of different players. And like, let's just hit the DeCorian Moore part. Here we go. The more-to-more connection. We saw it early in the game, the explosiveness, the ability to separate, and then after the catch with the ball, or I like the fact that they're incorporating him in the run game now consecutive weeks quite a bit. Had a rushing touchdown, which was probably just as impressive as the long touchdown, just because of the way he maneuvered through traffic. And honestly, I live watching it, I was surprised he scored. And then you watch the replay, just the athleticism to I guess elevate yourself off your outside foot, keep the inside foot in the air, and then reach out like that from like the 4 or 5 yard line. Just a freakish athleticism from that guy. He is absolutely as advertised. Last week the big story was the blocking. This week it was the fact that he was, an absolute freak show once he had the football. And again, he's not the only one. And I think probably just to save some time, and we'll have plenty of time next week leading into the Northwestern game, and certainly the mailbag, to kind of go through more players who stood out and what we think of some of these rotations. But he in particular, now consecutive weeks, you see the 5-star true freshman come out here and make plays, and you just go, this guy's kind of unlike what you've seen from an Oregon receiver before. He just really is.
Here's a stat for you on Corian Moore. First Oregon freshman since at least 1996 to have a rushing and receiving touchdown in the same game. He's the 5th Oregon receiver since at least 1996, and first since Jalen Redd in 2019 to have a rushing and receiving touchdown in the same game as well. So he's doing things that, quite honestly, like it's funny when Nate Kruger, really good SID at Oregon, provides us really good notes about this team. But when he includes at least 1996, it's meaning he's having trouble finding records to keep going back and finding these stats, because it's such a unique thing. He's doing things we haven't seen at Oregon as a receiver, and it's only week 2.
Yeah, I mean, like, you think about the comparisons of players who had that versatility at Oregon. Like, the first 2 names, for whatever reason, that came to mind were DeAnthony Thomas, and DeCorian is several inches taller and far stouter. And then just from a physical perspective, it reminds me a little bit of Josh Huff, except for
Yeah.
The straight line speed's better, the wiggle's better. And I thought Josh Huff was a fantastic player. He's definitely one of the guys I really liked watching, now 15 years ago. It's just a really, really unique talent. And I love the way that Will Stein is using him. And to your point earlier about the creative play calls, I thought it was interesting. We'll reference John Evans, our student reporter again. He asked Dan about the D'Air Hill touchdown. By the way, DeCorian, not the only true freshman to get in the end zone. They had 3 different true freshmen to get in. D'Air got in for the first time, and now Jordan Davison is 4 on the season. But he asked about kind of the play design there, and I thought it was notable that Dan said, like, we don't see those as trick plays. Those are like core parts of our offense. Like, those are things we're going to rely on. That just speaks to how deep in his bag Will is and how much time and they've, spent this offseason and invested in kind of being creative and finding different ways to find matchups. And I mean, like, I thought the point of John's question, it was a good one on the D'Air Hill touchdown was DeCorian was in the backfield as a running back and D'Air was lined up as a receiver, and the ball goes to D'Air on kind of the end around reverse. And that's just from a personnel perspective, getting creative, finding a way to take advantage of certain mismatches. Because we know through a couple of weeks with Hill, like, just like DeCorian Moore, that's a guy who you get him in the open field and it's basically lights out, it's over. And that was certainly the case today. So the complement of weapons here is incredibly exciting. We haven't even hit on the fact that, like, Noah Whittington opens the game with a 59-yard touchdown, just like right off the bat. And there you go. You're off and running. I tweeted it out, and it's the truth. Everybody that touches the football looks the part and looks like they can take the ball to the end zone from anywhere on the field. I mean, Kenyon Sadiq back-to-back weeks only has had a couple touches. You almost feel like he's being underutilized, but then you look up and go, they've got so many other guys.
Quarterback today.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So, and that doesn't surprise me too much that they would do that with him. I asked him at Big Ten Media Day about the possibility of being a little wildcat quarterback, because I asked him that Tyler Warren did a lot. I was kind of making a little comparison to Tyler at Penn State and how he'd be using the offense. And Kenyon kind of smiled and said, well, I did that a lot in high school. And I went, okay, I'll tuck that away. And so I'm not that surprised to see him do it, but I mean, just the creativity here in a game that they just blew him away in it really stands out. Probably should do defense since we're about 30 minutes in. We've just talked offense, especially because Dan comes out of this game basically saying this is probably one of the best defensive performances that he's had since they've been here. And as a defensive-minded coach, to hold Oklahoma State to 9 first downs to 3 points. They had 15 drives in this game. Only 3 go over midfield. One results in the field goal, the other turnover and downs, and then the final just kind of runs the clock out. You could go a bunch of different directions. I'll kind of defer to you, Matt, on this, but just like we're talking about, kind of gushing over the offense, the defense was phenomenal, and special teams was phenomenal again. I mean, like, you go through the whole thing, where's the weak spot? And maybe listeners, maybe that's a question for the mailbag. I'm curious to hear, like, what concerns you, because remember, it was goal line offense. At least that was one thing that was thrown our way. A red zone offense last week coming out of the Montana State game. Pretty dang efficient this time around, and frankly, I'm kind of scratching my head going, I don't know where you point if you want to look at weaknesses. But let's go to defense, Matt. Kind of what kind of thoughts stand out to you there?
Yeah, this was a game where they're going to get completely overlooked because of the number of points the team finished with. But 2 interceptions for return for touchdowns. And granted, look, I get it. Like, those plays happened when the game was basically already over, but they happened in back-to-back sequences. They were the last scores for the game. Jerry Mixon, 26-yard interception return. Very next offensive play for Oklahoma State. Peyton Woodyard gets in there and takes 130 yards for an interception. But I like the fact that, Bryce Betcher was all over the place in this game when it was early. Hard hits. I thought Tatum Tuioti was great in the backfield. He had a sack. He led the Ducks to 1.5 tackles for loss. Dylan Dinneman was really good in pass coverage. And look, going into this game, Lanning highlighted the fact that Oklahoma State was probably going to be the toughest test to date that they've played in his time here at Oregon, of teams that are going to try to go tempo, and also teams that are going to try and really stretch you vertically, try and take shots down the football field. And this team had 2 interceptions. They had 7 pass breakups. And for the most part, they only really allowed 1 big pass play all game. And it was on a play in which Oregon sold out its defense on a 3rd down, I think it was. And they dropped 3 guys back in coverage. And it was basically gambling, thinking, hey, we think we're going to get to the quarterback before he's going to have time to even remotely find the open guy. He made a good decision. He avoided a tackle in the backfield and kind of stumbling through a ball to a wide open receiver for a 35-yard game. But the beauty of it all is the throw couldn't be on point. It couldn't be accurate. It wasn't on time. And that allowed time for the defender to kind of get there and make the tackle as it was caught. And that's the drive that got inside the red zone, and they had to settle for a field goal. Overall, this was just an utter dominant performance on both sides of the football. And Oregon's front line, their front 7 is really, really good. And it makes the DBs, who are talented, no doubt about it. I'm not trying to disparage them at all, but Oregon's front 7 is so impressive. I've talked a little bit about it. I think you kind of hinted around it too, that we kind of feel like this defense could have a unit up front in the front 7 that's maybe a little bit better than last year's team, even though they lost like 4 or 5 guys to the NFL. And so far through 2 games, opponent understanding, it's scary how athletic, how deep, and how talented they are. This front 7 for Oregon is really nasty. And just like the offense, when new guys come in, I'm equally impressed with how just game ready they are. And I think Oregon's closing speed is something that we need to discuss because it's pretty darn special.
Yeah, and to touch on just a comparison to last year, I mean, when I did a little Q&A with CBS commentator Gary Danielson up on the site, and I think I threw that up Thursday evening or Friday morning. And one of the things he told me over the phone was he watched the opener and thinks this Oregon defense might be better than it was last year. And you kind of take that for a grain of salt. And he said, maybe I was just kind of mesmerized and caught in the moment by what he saw. But I come out of this game feeling like that might end up being accurate. That might, it's possible. And again, we're being prisoners of the moment, but this is kind of what you do when you react to a game live. And we've now watched 2 weeks of Oregon football, and it's been about as impressive on both sides of the ball as possible. Like, I don't know if it's a stretch to say they might be better on both sides of the ball this year than last year. Last year's team went 13-0 and won the Big Ten. And again, that feels like a big leap. We need to see them, frankly, play Penn State. We need to see them play Indiana and USC and Iowa and Washington and some of these upper echelon or more competitive programs, because these first 2 weeks clearly they're not playing a murderer's row. But I do agree, like, it's hard not to come out of these games feeling like what we just said about on the offense, about how they had so many different guys contribute. I totally agree, Matt. Same thing on defense. They rotate a bunch of dudes in here. Like, to illustrate that, I guess I can show this for the YouTube crowd. The box score here, and they do the defensive stats. I'll show you. They have to do it on 2 pages because they have so many. They had so many contributors on defense that they had to do 2 different pages. I think Dan said after the game there were 28 different players who made tackles. It's the same thing. They rotate through a bunch of dudes, and everybody who comes in is awesome. And the speed to the ball. Like, I'll be curious on PFF how many missed tackles they're credited with in this game. But the beauty of it was when they missed tackles, they had 2 or 3 guys swarming to them to stop the play from going anywhere else. And I imagine this was probably a really difficult debut for Zane Flores, who finished at 7 for 19, 67 yards, 2 interceptions. He sacked twice. He's pressured. Again, love to see the PFF data because I think a ton of times, in fact, I know after the game, Peyton Woodyard, who had the second pick six, basically said, we talk about coverage sacks. It was kind of the inverse on the interception. That was a pass rush interception because he said he didn't think Flores even saw him because he had all – and then I'd have to go back. Do you remember who was on the rush there? Someone was right up in his face and made it difficult. It's probably a second teamer.
Maybe Aiden Breland, because he was pretty active the whole game. I'm just spitballing there.
Yeah. I apologize for not having the name and not having seen the play recently enough. It might be on YouTube somewhere or on a social media if we want to pull it up. And it's not a big deal. But the point is like you're right. The defensive front So many guys are impactful. And it's not just that sometimes they don't show up in the stat sheet, because if you were to ask Peyton Woodard, at least the way he talked about it after the game, like, sure, he was the one who caught the ball and ran it in for 6 points, but that play doesn't happen without the pressure that was created on the pass rush there. So, and again, it continues to be like you go through this and look at they're starting four freshmen on this defense right now, right? If you include redshirt freshmen.
Yep.
Sorry if this is bad for my audio flipping through pages, but I mean, Aaron Flowers is a redshirt freshman. Tione Gray is a redshirt. What's that?
Dakota Fields.
Dakota
he didn't
Fields.
start today.
But Tione Gray is a redshirt freshman. Ifeoma Badegu is a redshirt freshman, and Brendan Finney is a true freshman. That's 4 freshmen who basically didn't have roles at all. I mean, didn't have roles in all of last year's team. I think 3 of those guys didn't. Obviously, Finney didn't play because he wasn't on the team, but 3 of those guys didn't have, I don't even think, snaps. I think Tione Gray had like 24 snaps last year. The other 2 guys basically weren't involved. And yet this is what they're looking like. And if you were to go all the way down that list of, that was just kind of showing the viewers at home, you'd find a bunch more true freshmen, redshirt freshmen. So it continues to be kind of like just a wealth of riches here. And again, the depth here, you just go, it's hard to foresee a situation here where, like, another thing, I guess I'll say that Gary Danielson told me in the interview is like, if you have a player, even like a key starter, who has like a bad hamstring or hurts his shoulder, sit him out for a couple of weeks, because you don't necessarily right. And like we should note, Theron Johnson, we expected coming in would be a starter, hasn't played these 2 games. Definitely their most veteran, experienced corner. He doesn't have a role right now because he's injured, and there's no drop off. And then we did see a Jaleel Florence for the very first time all season there late in the 4th quarter, kind of parsing through what Dan said and then watching the games. Jaleel coming off an injury, probably taking some time to get ready. He's like their 5th or 6th corner right now.
And to think about like Theron Johnson, how good is he going to have to be to take a spot? Like,
yeah, right.
Like if he comes in and takes a spot after being healthy, that's going to tell you everything we're going to know about how good this unit is. And I think maybe to wrap the show up here, unless you got anything last parting thoughts, you can comment here on this as well. But
yeah,
I don't know what more Oregon can do in a game the last 2 weeks to hammer home they're as good as advertised. Like, you play an FCS opponent, and the margins of success and the margins to impress onlookers from outside the program is razor thin. It's really hard to win an FCS game and have people coming out being like, you know what? I know they didn't play anybody really all that impressive. They should have won, but they still really made a big lasting impression on me. And then today against Oklahoma State, a team that's maybe they're down some pieces. They're down. They're coming off a 3-9 year last year. So they're certainly not the Oklahoma State team that we've kind of been accustomed to seeing. But nonetheless, I don't know what more Oregon could do. And over the last 2 weeks, to come out and say, we're for real. We are legit. You need to take us seriously. I don't know what more they could do.
Atticus Sappington could have broke the school record from a field goal perspective today, Matt. Would that have done it? That
would have done it.
57-yard attempt, didn't have the leg. I don't think he even had the I think it was offline too. But because I was thinking earlier, I mentioned like what went wrong, quote unquote. We did learn James Ferguson Reynolds is he punted both times.
He can punt the football.
Punted twice. He pinned him at the 5-yard line on the first. Second one was maybe not as productive. Not that it matters too much, but we did learn a little bit about special teams. Sappington, hit a 60-yarder in the fall, one of the fall scrimmages. Was again not quite on the mark from 57, which I hadn't even done the research. We had to do it kind of on the fly there. The record is 56 yards by, I think you said Tommy Townsend in 1992.
Yep.
So he was going for a school record there, and we do know that, I guess now, who the punter is, or at least who the punter was at this point in the season. So we learned a little bit from that, and then I guess one last special teams thing just to hit another special teams element. Gary Bryant continues to be a very reliable punt returner, but after watching DeCorian Moore's return there in the 4th quarter, I'm kind of going like, maybe I want him back there a little bit too, because I don't know how he got the corner. Frankly, he had like a little stutter step, like the defender had like a perfect angle totally looked like he had him corralled. He just kind of takes a kind of a chop step, and the defender kind of freezes, and then he just accelerates by him and gets the corner. Honestly, reminded me, we referenced the game earlier in 2012. DeAnthony Thomas against Colorado had a punt return that was kind of the same way. Like I think DeAnthony like reversed field and ran around a bunch and then just like scooted around a bunch of people, was just faster. Shades of that. So I know Gary's very reliable. I'm not asking for a change, and frankly, Dan has said it many times, and so has Joe Lorick. Like the number one priority in the return game is just like possess the football, get the offense the possession, and with how good the offense looks like, that should be the priority. But there's something special when that guy has the football, and it was very much on display on that punt return.
100%. You can read our coverage from postgame from Autzen Stadium on DuckTerritory.com. Really appreciate you guys listening. Highly encourage you guys to read the work there. We'll have more up Sunday. And then, hey, we're transitioning to week 3 starting tomorrow. Oregon goes to Northwestern. Big noon kickoff. That's a 9 a.m. Pacific time kick on Fox. I will be there at that game. That's the one of the travel assignments I've drawn. Erik will be at the next road game, I believe, that we'll be traveling to later on this season. But we'll be reporting live there, and we'll have full coverage up through all of next week before Northwestern. So highly encourage you guys to go check out DuckTerritory.com. But until the next time, you've been listening to the Autzen Audibles podcast.
Talk to you later, folks.